Today I am failing at building a butcher block countertop. Hey guys, how's it going? So, this was supposed to be a butcher block countertop to install over top of my washer and dryer. I guess it ended up working out that this project went screwy on me since now I have a laundry/utility sink to install down there and this countertop wouldn't have worked as easily anyway. That being said, still frustrating, and that being said, this definitely isn't the first project that hasn't worked out, but this might be the first one that went this far before becoming unsalvageable in its current state. So, yeah, let's jump into it. To start this project off, I raid my lumber rack and pull down 30 or so pallet slats from my last pallet harvest and start ripping off one edge at the table saw to get rid of the rounded corners. Then I set my table saw fence to roughly 2 inches and rip off the opposite side to get a consistent width between boards. And then once more through the saw on the original side just to smooth out the boards. So far so good. Now over at the miter saw I set the stop to 6 feet or so and cut all of the boards to the same length. If you're curious about when I was working on this project, I'm pretty sure that this is the batleth I built for the Orland Miller Woodshop Wooden Weapon Challenge almost a year ago. And speaking of Orland, you should go check out his channel. He is doing a 500 subscriber giveaway that you might be able to sneak in on if you go over right now. He is giving away the twin ninja size he built a while back once he hits 500 subscribers. You can go check out this video up here for more details, and good luck if you're able to get in under 500. Once I had the boards cut to length, I broke out the random orbit sander and gave the sides of the board a light sanding with 80 grit. More just to get rid of any of the surface gunk so that the glue would adhere a little bit better. Again, so far so good. It was probably a week or two later by the time I got back out there and had needed my miter saw for something, so I figured I should get the boards off of it and get them glued up into the countertop. I laid out the clamps on the workbench and set up enough boards to make a 12-inch wide panel. Had I not picked up my new thickness planer the week before, I probably would have just done one massive glue up, but I think doing it in multiple sections might have worked out better. Seeing as how this project didn't work out, I don't know, it might have worked better if I just did one big panel. So, your guess is as good as mine, though, yeah, moving on. After the glue had dried, which again I think was about a week or so later by the time I got out there again, I scraped off most of the glue squeeze out so it didn't interfere with the planer, and ran it through the planer until I had a perfectly flat surface on both sides. Emphasis on flat. Off camera I repeated the same process for the second panel and glued the two panels together. Here's where things started going a little bit screwy. As far as I can remember, the panel came out of the clamps flat, and since this project was happening in the background, to get it out of my way while I worked on something else, I made sure it was stored flat on top of the washer and dryer. I figured if that's where I was going to be putting it, that would be where I could store it. When I got back to it a couple months later, it had potato chipped fairly decently on me. No problem, this is still fixable, or so I thought. Back in the shop, I cut some scrap plywood to width and built a quick frame, and then built a sled for my router, which, if you missed that video, you can check that out up here. I ran the router over the countertop a couple times on both sides and got it flat again. And I only ended up losing one router bit on one hidden nail I apparently missed while I was processing the boards, so not too bad. Then, as you can tell, this made a fair bit of a mess, so I dug out my leaf blower with the vacuum attachment and cleaned up all of the sawdust. So now that I have the countertop flat, I remembered seeing others use C-channel in their tabletops to keep them flat, so I figured I would give that a try. I'm going to assume that the square stock I had was just a little bit too flimsy for the task, as it really ended up doing nothing in the long run. Either way, I cut the square stock in half with the angle grinder. I didn't worry too much about cleaning up the edge since, in theory, this was going to be embedded in the countertop. And then I cut the pieces to the length I needed. Over at the drill press, I drilled in a bunch of, admittedly messy holes to screw the now C-channel into the countertop. And with the C-channel done, I marked out the locations on the countertop and routed out the mounts. Since it was in the underside, I really didn't worry about straight edges or anything. I just freehanded the cut. It's underneath, you're never going to see it. Then I just screwed the C-channel into place. A couple days later, I finally got around to sanding the countertop and I worked my way through the grits up to 220. With the sanding mostly done, I figured it was a good time to flush cut the ends. So I set up a straight edge, took off the ends with my circular saw, and sanded the ends up to 220 grit as well. And then I abandoned the project again for a couple weeks, and when I finally got back to it, it had potato chipped on me again. I didn't worry about it too much at this point though, since there were a bunch of voids I was planning on filling with some epoxy, so I figured I would take care of that first. Down in my finishing room, I taped the cracks on the bottom side of the countertop just in case they went all the way through, mixed up some 5-minute epoxy, and poured on the cracks with about as much precision as a Neanderthal doing brain surgery. Since I did this at midnight, I left the epoxy to do its thing overnight, not that it needed it, and the next day took the countertop out to the shop again to try and clean off the extra epoxy. I tried to take off the excess with the hand plane, sander, and chisels, but I ended up either tearing out the wood along with the epoxy or it was just chipping out on me. So I said, screw it, and broke out the router sled again. I picked a spot somewhere in the center of the countertop as the depth for the router bit and shortly realized that I was only cutting the perimeter of the countertop, leaving the center and almost 1/8 inch thick layer of epoxy in the center untouched. And here is where I decided to call it. The way I looked at it, it would have been too thin to work well as a countertop if I went too much further with the router sled, and I had no guarantee that it wouldn't continue to potato chip on me the more I took off the top. So, to put this project out of its misery, I took the C-channel out, ripped it in half at the table saw, cut it into pieces with the crosscut sled, and then I set up the thickness planer and made all of the pieces at least a uniform thickness. I still have the countertop pieces. I figured I could make something out of the laminated slabs, which at least have stayed flat now, so yay there, I guess. I'm not going to make cutting boards out of them since they're technically still pallet wood with who knows what spilled on them, but maybe I can turn them into signs or something, who knows. Actually, I have an idea for one, but that'll be another project. So yeah, this was a failed project. Or, at least it was a really roundabout way of making 8 roughly square foot laminated panels. So, however you want to look at it, I guess. Either way, I'm going to call it a video. Thank you all for watching, and if you like what I'm doing here, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. If you have any questions or comments, I look forward to reading them in the comment section below. And if you want to see more up-to-date projects, you can follow me on Instagram at John the Schreiner. Otherwise, I hope to see you in the next video, and have a good one. I'm just going to stare awkwardly at the camera now for a little while. Yep, still here. Okay, bye.